Hello, this is Neo, just an average CSGO player, and you're watching Thorin's YouTube channel.
FaZe Clan last week stormed EPICENTER, winning the tournament in emphatic fashion, winning 6 straight maps in 3 straight best of 3s, defeating NIP, and then Team Liquid, and then finally NateDOhDoubleG in the final. This was their first title, notable title, since ESL won Belo Horizonte in mid-June, when obviously they had Croman as a stand-in. It's their first title with Olofmeister in the lineup, actually since 2017, since the very end of 2017 at ECS Season 4 finals. All the tournaments they'd been to with Olof in 2018, they'd notably made the finals, semi-finals, etc., and lost with him. Coming into this tournament, the storyline wasn't even supposed to be about FaZe Clan, or at least it wasn't that FaZe Clan's going to win the tournament. The main storylines was Team Liquid's looking to win a title without Astralis at an event. You know, they failed in New York. Okay, no mouse spots even here. Can they get it done without Astralis when they're at EPICENTER? Na'Vi trying to course correct after their massive fuck up in New York, not even making the playoffs after so many top 4s with Electronic. Also no Astralis. Chance to win the tournament themselves and get back on track since ESL won Cologne. FaZe Clan was coming in, quite frankly, just looking to establish themselves as a top team again, as to go against the Team Liquids of the world, the Na'Vis of the world, show that they could play against these teams, potentially get top 4, maybe make the final, beat out on the likes of the NIPs and the Hellraisers of the world. That's all FaZe Clan realistically was looking for. Winning the tournament was somewhat improbable, because even though you want to say with the players on paper that FaZe always has a puncher's chance, we've been saying that for the last few tournaments since they got Olofmeister back, and there just hasn't been that puncher's chance, quite frankly. And you look at how they'd played with Karrigan as the in-game leader, it was fairly woeful since Olof's return. Like, I agreed with the fact that that team had run its course, that lineup had run its course, but you didn't necessarily know what could you expect from the Nico in-game leadership situation. It's not surely going to make them good or better, right? So that's the problem. You look at their run overall, it started pretty weak, actually. They lost one map to Ents, who, yeah, they were coming off the Star Series, but you saw against the top teams in, Ents was nothing special. They lost Inferno to Ents. Thing is, that was their pick. That was FaZe Clan's pick. That was a map that they thought they were strong on. Then they were easily handled by Na'Vi 2-0. I know you're going to look at the scoreline and try and say, oh, it wasn't that easy. I've seen so many times that this FaZe Clan lineup and this FaZe Clan core has played a decent to good CT side on train and then fallen apart calling on T side. So even though Nico might think they should have won that game, there's a million games you should have won that you didn't win from that exact side. And I'm out as soon as I see FaZe Clan don't hit double digit CT side on train, quite frankly, until proven otherwise. The overpass game was an absolute smash, so at that point in time, you're looking like, wow, this map pool is completely flexed for Na'Vi. Like, where the fuck is FaZe even going to go if they're going to be picking overpass against a team like Na'Vi? Only Nico had shown up at this point in the tournament. He was looking really, really sick. The rest of the team just looked quite weak, actually. They looked like, as a result, they had no puncher's chance whatsoever, because Gardner wasn't online. Rain was still weak. Karrigan hadn't found his place. Olof was just doing okay. No one else was doing well except Nico, basically. So, quite frankly, it looked like some sort of super-powered Nico sports. If you remember when Nico was in Mouse Sports, he was the in-game leader and the star player. He had to drop 30 or more. Even then, they could still lose because he didn't get enough out of Nex and didn't get enough out of Chris J, and you knew you weren't going to get much out of Spiddy and Dennis. Then the playoff run begins, and everything changes. Because they start off against NIP, a team that, yeah, they looked rocky at this tournament. They'd had their problems. But NIP, and obviously lost it to Vanguard. NIP looked like, map-wise, they should be able to match up with this FaZe Clan who's kind of got no map pool, quite frankly. Instead, FaZe Clan 2-0s them, looks really strong, beat Snip on Overpass to show that it wasn't a joke that they were picking Overpass previously, settled on Mirage as their own pick, which proved later to be very key in the tournament, because FaZe Clan, both with Olaf in the lineup and just before he came back, had been trying to mess around with having Dust 2 as their pick when Olaf came back and Karrigan was still the in-game leader. More recently, moving to Inferno, trying to make that their pick, because no one can really settle on Dust 2 at the moment. They'd had Mirage as the decider in the other series, and because they won this particular map here, it made them realise our Mirage is actually looking pretty fucking good. Let's just pick it against everyone, right? And that proved to be a key to winning the tournament, as we will later see. Now, in this series also, it wasn't just Nico who went ham. Guardian came along for a big-time series himself, and that proved to be a key reason why they were able to blow past Nip. But then he came into the semi-final against Team Liquid. Team Liquid came in, quite frankly, as a heavy favourite. You look at their placings recently, you look at the kind of performance it's taken from Astralis, from Mousesports to actually beat them. They looked really sick, both in this tournament and previous tournaments, coming up to this particular semi-final. Then you look at the map pool, Mirage and Inferno. That looks great for Team Liquid. If you're picking Mirage against Team Liquid, they say, thank you very much. That's always a map we've enjoyed playing. We're just going to pick Inferno, a map you yourself have abandoned as your pick, and that we are gods on. Because Inferno is a map where Team Liquid are, if Astralis is the best Inferno team in the world, Team Liquid is the clear number 2, and actually I think it's pretty close to Astralis. It's just that in the direct head-to-head, Astralis typically beats them on it. But Team Liquid was on a 7-game LAN winning streak on Inferno, including a game against Astralis, and at the Major, where the pressure was. So, one of the real reasons why I thought FaZe Clan couldn't beat Astralis, quite frankly, was the firepower issue. Sure, Guardian had looked good against Nip, but was he going to show up in this particular match against Team Liquid? It's just going to be Nico. I'm going with Team Liquid all day long with their firepower. First of all, in the second map, Inferno, Guardian went ham. He really showed up big time. Karrigan top fragged the whole series, had the best ADR of the series. Now, that's a massive outlier. He didn't do that for the rest of the tournament. You couldn't expect him to do that. So that was a big, big game changer. And Nico, as usual, was pretty decent. It wasn't his best series of the tournament, but he did enough himself. I don't think you can even put this particular series, quite frankly, down to Team Liquid choking. Minus Twists, who I do think underperformed. They didn't really show up properly in the series. Team Liquid generally got decent production out of everyone. Team Liquid generally fragged with the guys from FaZe, if you ignore people like Karrigan going way above the numbers you'd expect. I actually think they also did a lot of good things in the series. It's just that for my money, Team Liquid took too long to make adaptations, particularly in both of the first halves. Like the Inferno game, they just didn't figure out that they needed to up the tempo and play fast-paced onto A because of the passive setup of the FaZe Clan guys on B, so you know it's only going to be 3 people on A. Instead, they were doing a lot of slow, tactical sit-behind-the-smoke play, and actually, this is where FaZe, for moments, looked like the old FaZe Clan of late last year, who were insanely dominant and won that New York event over Team Liquid, where they could just sit back, just play angles with all those aimers and just shoot your head off when you came in the sight. They didn't need to play aggressively up on you, or when they did play aggressively up, if you went very, very slow, then you had to worry about the fact you were being pressured everywhere on the map. So, when we go beyond that into the final, again, all signs point before the final veto that this is going to be Na'Vi's win, because Na'Vi's looked amazing at this point in time. Simple had inhuman stats. He was averaging over a kill a round coming into the final. You might say, yeah, but he didn't play the top teams. Yeah, he didn't play the top teams because he couldn't. Because people like fucking a Vanguard were beating out some of the teams that he was supposed to be playing. He played FaZe Clan in 2 maps. Well, they weren't a top team before, I agree. But when they got to the final, they won the event. So in the end, he had played against them. And obviously, by the end of the event, played 4 maps against FaZe Clan. Then you look at the map pool. Where the fuck was FaZe Clan going to go? What, are they going to pick Mirage against Na'Vi, are they? Well, that's going to be a bad state of affairs, right? Na'Vi can pick Train or Overpass. They've got all these options to where to go. As long as they don't fuck up and pick Inferno, which Na'Vi's been known to do. But luckily for this event, had gotten out of the pattern of doing, and were picking Train. I felt like, right, this is Arvy's map all day. Because even if they lose a map, which they often want to do, they get to a 3rd map and they're favoured on that map as well. In fact, in this series, they could have been favoured on all 3 maps. So my concern was that they might fuck up and pick Inferno. But I'd seen them picking Train, so I thought, great, just stick with that. Pick Train. You won it against them before. Good, let's have this final. The only concern was, in the veto, what do you know? FaZe Clan picks Mirage. Out comes Na'Vi and picks Dust 2. Now, that immediately gave me concerns. I had concerns on the desk about this. Sure, Na'Vi had been on a little streak on it. Some of it online, though, to be fair. Sure, they'd had LAN wins over teams that are good on it, like Big. Somewhat like Hellraisers to some degree. I mean, I'm questionably good on any map, but you know what I mean. Still a very questionable pick, though, because Train is the obvious pick here. I actually think they would have won Train if they'd have played it here, and it would have been the key respite to get them to that 3rd map of Overpass. Then, even if they'd lost us 2, on paper it shouldn't have mattered because you've got Mirage there and you've got Overpass as the decider. So as long as you don't get beat 2-0, you can have still a good chance and you are still favoured to win this series. The key for me in this series was, look at map 1, Mirage. Fragging was good from both teams. You go look at the scoreboard at the end of the first half, you're like, how the fuck is Na'Vi only on 5 rounds? How's it taken this to get them 5 rounds? Because FaZe just got all the key rounds. The fragging, very, very even. T-side for FaZe looked amazing, and part of it does come down to the fact that they understood how to play around Simple, who was going off, but he was the only one going off. So you let him go off and you shut everyone else down and you play where he isn't, and that's how you win the game. Dust 2 was a complete joke, obviously. Na'Vi was absolutely mentally broken. They never got in this game. They could never hurt the economy of FaZe. They did all sorts of stupid force buys that didn't work. Electronic ended with 4 kills and 36 ADR for the game. Bear in mind, it is as simple with his sidekick Electronic showing Na'Vi. If he does that badly, yeah, you're not going to play well against FaZe, especially not a FaZe Clan that actually looks somewhat revitalized with some decent heavy hitters. Olofmeister had a big performance over the series and really made it so that Simple couldn't go at ham on Dust 2 anyway, but even if he had have gone more ham, it wouldn't have fucking mattered. Now, the keys to FaZe Clan's victory here. First of all, let's start with the map pool, because in that 6-game winning streak, they played 4 different maps and won all 4 of those maps. So their Mirage looked way better. It looked a lot more comparable to how powerful they used to be back when they had Olof in late 2017, except Nico brought his own flavour to it, because he seemed to have a flavour, funnily enough, for how to play some kind of a Carrigan style CS and make it work. Inferno was very promising. That's the one I want to see for the next events, such as Blast. I'm not buying that they're a good team on Train or Dust 2 yet, yo. Dust 2, I certainly think they could play with their heavy hitters. I don't think anyone, quite frankly, can be reliably good on Dust 2 beyond like 60-70% win rate, quite frankly. Train, I definitely don't buy. Still want to see Nico call some T-sides on that and get over like 8 rounds, because I haven't seen it really seem like it's going to happen. Carrigan, I thought, was a big difference to this tournament, because for the tournament, his stats weren't that crazy. And if you watched him, he wasn't balling out of control, but he's one of the main reasons that they weren't going to a third map in that Team Liquid series. He had some smart play. What I liked is he wasn't winning like big aim duels or fragging everyone's head off. He was getting a lot of smart kills where he found openings and he noticed map pressure elsewhere on the map and used those timings to get shots in people's side of their heads and the back of their heads. What I love is he didn't sulk because he's not the in-game leader and pull a happy and just sabotage the team and play shit and rush himself out of the team. He actually gave himself a chance to be a legit player in this team as a supportive type player, a setup player. Now, Nico was obviously the big talk of the town because his in-game leading style turned out to be much better than you expected. First of all, it worked for himself. It was like the old mouse days. He could get his game off, and if the game wasn't going well and no one else was fragging, he could call around himself and give himself a chance to win based on that. It worked for Olofmeister, the guy that he loves and thinks is such a sick player and was clearly able to call around, especially on Mirage T side. Others, sure, they took their time. Guardian took a while to get online. Carrigan eventually got going. But Carrigan, crucially, was able to find his, seemingly outside of the system, just did whatever he wanted within his spot within it. And I thought a telling point that Nico isn't just some aim player, that he has some sort of, obviously he has game sense, but some kind of a cerebral element to him, was this comment he made in his interview at HLTV.org after the final, where he said that because he knew the famous thing that Na'Vi has such an OP talent in Simple, that he's even so good he can play other people's spots, and so they often rotate him to the B site on CT side Mirage to cover for where Zeus would normally be. So if you go there thinking you're getting an easy kill on Zeus to abuse him, it's Simple there and Simple there with an AWP, which is a completely different dynamic. Nico anticipated that would happen, and as a result called a bunch of B fakes to hold Simple over in the B site while attacking the A site, which is what allowed the Na'Vi guys to get a massive lead early on and really put themselves in great position to win that map. And it was too late for FaZe Clan guys, too late for Na'Vi to get back in the game at that point in time, even with Simple getting over 20 kills himself. That was smart. Somewhat, funnily enough, akin to what people used to do against Nico when Nico was in mouse spots and he was the one lone superstar. They would figure out where he was and try and constantly play away from where he was, so that even if he got his frags, they were all exit kills or trying to get into a site, and he couldn't just shut the whole site down and win you the round outright. Now, clearly for me, Nico was the MVP of the tournament in this context, because unfortunately Na'Vi couldn't play many top teams except FaZe Clan. Simple's numbers were amazing over the tournament. In fact, so godlike that in terms of just numbers, he should be the MVP. But in the final, even though he did well on Mirage, he couldn't have that much impact. Obviously, couldn't do very well on Dust 2 with his team getting absolutely smashed in. His sidekick in Electronic never turned up, and his team looked woeful in the final. So overall, Nico played some amazing teams. Nico had a sick performance throughout. Nico still had very, very, very good numbers, just not in human Simple level numbers. And he had the impact of being the in-game leader at the same time. So I know it's hard to put the intangibles in, but overall, I think you have to edge it to him for that one, because final did end up being so much of the tournament all in all within who they ended up playing. Olofmeister, as I've said, Nico loves him, seems to have a better sense for how to use him than Carrigan did. Guardian came back to life briefly. Generally, by the way, most people in FaZe Clan, even after the playoff run, you think they did awesome. Go look at the stats. They weren't that sick overall. It was still mainly Nico who did it. They just each had their own series to come alive in. Guardian versus Nip, Carrigan versus Team Liquid, and Olofmeister in the final versus Na'Vi. So as a result, is it that believable to think they're all going to turn up? And quite frankly, Rain didn't turn up almost at all. Nah, not really. It was kind of by committee in this one. So looking for the future of FaZe, Okay, it's early days, but Nico's calling has shown more promise than you maybe could have figured, even though it ties back into some of the things he did back in Mouse Sports. I'll also add, I think there's a bit of the hangover effect where he's still taking some of the things Carrigan did and using them in terms of what works. For me, it was figuring out the map pool a little bit more that's given him a little bit of a spurt at this point in time. Remember, Mouse Sports was good under Nico. Better than they should have been, quite frankly. So it's interesting to see what he'll do with FaZe Clan. I still think in the long run, you're going to have to cut people. Probably Carrigan, maybe another player, Rain or Olfmeister. You're going to have to get someone else in there. I just think that's the future. Maybe Guardian Titans. Basically, everyone except Nico's potentially on the chopping block. I also don't buy their map pool. Mirage looked really good. Let's see if that can continue. Inferno looked solid. Dust 2's playable. What would have happened elsewhere? I don't think they wanted to play Cash against Team Liquid. I don't think they're in a world where they can play Nuke. That's why they're perma-banning it. I think their overpass is questionable, and I never have had faith in Train, and I've seen nothing to change my mind on that. So this is an amazing one-off performance. I don't think they're going to go in and win Blast Pro Series. I think they can be a better team, and they're certainly a better team seemingly than when Carrigan was the in-game leader with Olaf returning. That was a very wonky team that hadn't found its identity again. But I think they've got a ceiling, they've got a limit. And if I had to guess, I don't think they'll be better than, say, the third or fourth best team in the world. I don't think actually they might even get that high. I would say more likely Na'Vi course corrects and FaZe Clan's fourth or fifth best, and especially because we don't know what the new mouse is going to be like. I would say that's a more realistic expectation. This video was kindly supported by Andreas, Snazore, Westerlund, Dean Tanglis, Gardner Wilson, Landon Thompson, NateDOhDoubleG, Kyla Harris, Travis Greb, James Harding, Daniel Yordanov, VeXii, Robert Baxter, and a special thanks goes out as always to Jerky's Minion. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Would you like to ask me a question in my monthly AMA? Would you fancy a few teasers for what's coming up in my content? How about taking part in an esports discussion with me? Well, put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today at the Patreon link in the description box below.